Good.
Sent it to camp for 2.
All right, it's 3 o'clock. We're going to get our workshop meeting started. So I'll call to order the Keystone Heights Airport Authority workshop meeting. It is September 14th, 2023. It is 3 p.m. Let me just remind all of us to mute our phone, put it on vibrate. And we'll start off with prayer and pledge of allegiance. So I ask everyone to please stand. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we pause to give you thanks and praise for who you are. Thank you, Father, for being mindful of us. We ask that you give us wisdom, give us insight, clarity, Lord, of all that we will review today to make good decisions for the airport. We continue to lift up David Dagenet and his family, continue to comfort them, bring peace to them. Lord, just help all that we do today, just advance the airport, and Lord, all that we do individually to bring glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Ms. Young, roll call. Here.
Vice Chair Fryer.
Here.
Mr. Daniels.
Maybe that's Dagenet.
Here.
Here.
Mr. Van Zandt.
Here.
Mr. Seaver.
Here.
Ms. Rutkowski.
Here.
Mr. Sherlock. Ms. Rothenbach.
I'm here.
Ms.
Mayor.
Thompson.
That's all that's here. Okay? All right, thank you. Let our record be show that Ms. Christine Thompson, City Councilwoman, is also with us today. All right, we have not received any public comment cards, so we'll move to item 2. Our workshop today is to finalize interview questions, format, and determine a short list of candidates for interview. I've broken that down, and of course, this is going to be very fluid, so as we walk through this, we'll pull it all back together. But I thought, I wrote down 4 things underneath item 2 that basically consists of that. I think we need to determine the number of candidates on the short list. We have 6 applicants. How many do we want to see on the short list?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there, of any of the applicants, are there any that the authority feels strongly that probably would not be interviewed, or feels strongly that they probably should be interviewed?
I can tell you because I've exchanged several emails with Jacob King. I've known Jacob for years. He's been in the Air Force a long time, for years. I know that he will not be discharged until October. And I think he reflected that on his application as well as made the resume. So, and I told him that. I told him that, we were having the workshops and we were moving forward, and he understood. So that's probably one of the 6 that I think we could probably set to the side.
We would not entertain interviewing him via Zoom or something.
If he makes the short list.
Oh,
but-
okay.
But Ms. Lynn was asking.
I was interpreting it as.
But like Ms. Lynn said, is there anybody that's obvious that maybe
Disqualifies or whatever.
just
Is not.
wouldn't meet?
I don't think.
Other than that, October's what, next month, right?
Yeah.
It's just 3 weeks away. It's very close.
I don't think 6 is too many to interview. That's a reasonable number. You're talking about a position that's fairly vital, and you can get a lot out of an interview.
Can I add something? And this,
Sure.
this may be considered irrelevant, but I do believe it is relevant to the situation. As far as our manpower situation goes here, and I know we're here to pick the manager spot, and I know as far as for our board and our bylaws, it's we're in charge of the manager, and then the manager's in charge of the people below them. I believe I've spoke to Mike recently, and he had made it known to me, and that he is leaving in November. And I don't know, how many people are aware of that, or if we need to consider this in our mind as far as, when looking at the situation and it having to do with deciding in this situation with Mr. King that you're referring to also, because again, that's going to put us in a situation where we may get an airfield manager and then we're right back down to minus a person. And the reason I say that is because physically, for the people that are physically here, as it stands right now, you have Mike here, you have Justin here, and you have Joni here. And I know you're here and doing what
I don't count.
Right, yeah, in the reality of all of it, as far as manpower and payroll, and staff for the airport, if something was to happen and you couldn't be here, you know what I'm saying, that puts us in a position to where, and I don't know if that's relevant, but I think it's something that should be.
You're talking about transition. Right, smooth transition.
And I don't know what the situation is going to be as far as it stands right now with everybody bumped up a position. Well, I say everybody, with between Mike and Justin, is that where we're going? Is that Justin's going to remain in that position as the airfield manager once we have a new airport manager, or so?
Well, our bylaws stipulate that the airport manager handles all staff.
Right.
And so I think that would be an answer that airport manager would make. So with respect to Mike, I had heard the same thing. I have not received anything official in writing with an end date of what that might be in November, or maybe with a little arm twisting, we could get him to maybe hold over an extra month. But those are all valid points, but the reality is we got to hire an airport manager.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, but I think that's just, with that in mind, is knowing what our manpower situation, because it'll put us right back to where we are right at the moment, because we're still going to be short a person.
Does the authority feel comfortable with their short list being all 6, or would you like to whittle that down?
When does the guy get out of the Air Force? Is it October 30th or October the 5th?
I don't remember.
I mean,
Well, it doesn't, it's only a few weeks away. I think.
It just said October state.
Yeah, it just says October 2023, so I don't know.
He said October 6th here on his application,
Yeah.
his first available date.
Leave here soon.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure he's on terminal leave.
I think he's still worth interviewing.
Oh,
I do too.
He's a very strong
I
candidate.
mean, the interviews are what, on the
Yeah,
26th?
He is.
yeah,
So that's 2 weeks from then, so.
yeah.
And anybody else may have to give 2 weeks' notice unless don't have jobs now. So, or a month's notice if they're a manager, but.
So then let me ask this, so if we kept all 6, are we going to try to limit that interview timeframe for each candidate? Because we're saying we're going to start at 10:30, because Lynn's got previous commitment. So that's the earliest that she can start. So that's another consideration. So
Well, if
what's,
you're going to spend and I'm just going from past experience, you're probably going to spend an hour with them or maybe more.
Yep.
But if you have to go into a second day, this is an important decision, I think. And I don't think 6 candidates in a management position is a bad number. You're going to be asking some vital questions of them and trying to get a feel for them. It's hard to do that if you start compressing that time.
I mean, I can just give you my 2 cents on the candidates. With Ms. Alvarez, she's very educated, but she has really no experience.
correct?
And to me, this is a big-time job. This is a white-collar professional position. And I don't feel that she qualifies for the position personally. I think she could do well in a technical role, so maybe with another airport, and kind of build her way up with some experience hands-on in a lesser role. But I think the wealth of this role, how big it is, I don't think she's qualified.
I agree. When I looked through, I came to the same conclusion, mainly about the experience, educational, academically.
Tons of education, which is great.
Which is great, but it's like you say, and I think the experience that she has had there at the airport has been pretty much limited
Yeah.
with more analytical analysis and other type things. So that narrows us down to 5 if everybody's of the same opinion about Ms. Kiana Alvarez?
Kiwana?
Kiana. Yeah, I think it's.
Alvarez, yep.
So are we good with 5?
In my mind, for some reason, I had 4 and I ranked them 1 through 6. And Miss Alvarez was number 6 out of that ranking in the order I wanted to interview them. And I'm okay with interviewing 5. If that's the pleasure of the board, I was gonna interview 4, and I really kind of think that,
And the 5 are very strong.
yeah.
I mean, my scores
The
are
other
pretty up
5
there.
could be a contender.
Well, I think 5 is doable, even with an hour. If we allocate an hour to each, that would still finish us up, before 5 that evening. We start at 10:30. Probably need to take a break for lunch in there. But, all right, so are we good with 5? Everybody good with that? Okay. So the next thing I put down was number of interview questions. And previously, we had talked about submitting questions about kind of related to our particular areas of responsibility here at the airport. And then that workshop got canceled. So I don't know if you had prepared some anyway, but let's first start off with how many questions do we want to ask? And again, kind of we'll commingle this with the format, Lynn, in that you're going to mediate this and be mediator and ask those questions. So
I would think maybe, and this is just my opinion, please feel free to tell me to hush, but I would think that maybe you would go and find out the information that each individual member would like to hear, and then see if you can consolidate that into questions, because I would hate to limit it to 6 questions, but there'd be a vital 7 or 8 question or follow-up. But that way, gather the information that you're looking for from each board member, and then consolidate questions from there. Would be my thought.
So can I give you my input on that?
Sure.
I really look at this very personal per candidate. And I know we may have basic questions that we want each of them to answer, right, that are standard. But as I went through each application, resume detail, my checklist, I went back over to confirm timelines of work, the different places they worked, what years they claim, all that. And each one of them, I have anywhere from 1 to 3 questions specific to their personal situation, which would not work as an open group question. You follow me? I mean, I had one guy, he's got airport stuff, but he says not one single word about FAA experience. That might be a question I want to ask him. What's your experience with FAA, right? Because it's not in his information. So I don't know. I mean, do you kind of see the format being like I'm just kind of curious how the format will be. It's going to be held here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So is it one person at a time in front of all of us?
Yes.
Okay, good. So that keeps it real personal, which is great. Maybe, I don't know, do you see as each one of us asking a question of that person once we start talking to them? Like somebody starts it and then we ask them a question and then we just go around the horn. If there's some basic questions, we can pose those, we throw standard questions is what I'm trying to say. But specific to their background is the ones that I probably want to know more about.
My only concern with just kind of opening up to questions is the time gets away from us.
Yes, you're going to have
Or the mediator
time.
pretty much regulate questions.
And typically, and Mr. Van Zandt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you've done it more than I have, but in government settings, you have a list of questions that every candidate's going to ask. Now, there might be some follow-up questions, but typically it'll be the mayor or a mediator or somebody who will be asking that question for everybody to answer. That way, those can take notes, and then if there's a follow-up question, then by all means. But you have...
I was thinking what David had mentioned was that, okay, Mr. Ludwig's got safety and security, so he'd come up with 2 to 3 questions out of that. I've got the intergovernmental responsibilities I'd come up with. So you may, Madam Mayor, have some real specifics based on how they answer everybody else's. at this point, if we're gonna interview 5 people and 6 of us are on the Air Park Authority, I'd say we all submit 2 questions from our, whatever committee,
Whatever we feel is
area of
relevant.
responsibility, thank you. And then the mayor can do whatever she wants to do for 3 or 4 minutes at the end of each one to get the, if whatever you're concerned about, because a lot of it's gonna come out.
It'll come out, yeah, right. And I agree with it being,
Follow up, just let you back clean up.
yeah, I mean, I agree with the focus of y'all being with your specialties, which is a great idea.
I think the nice thing with having the mayor ask questions also, because she can be that outside person looking in and probably looking at it from a standpoint of administrative management, budget, those types of things, rather than the specifics that we would get in the grass on as far as,
Yeah.
actual airport day-to-day type responsibilities. And
And, with my lack of aviation knowledge, I'm looking at it from a whole different perspective in general.
Correct.
And just looking for specific words that attach to the title and how it all comes together with the different roles, things that they do within the role. I mean, it's all over the place, very multifaceted. So I'm looking for budget, I'm looking for.
One thing I'll say, though, when you ask to speak to specific to each one, I think that takes the element of fairness away. We always had standardized that every candidate would have to ask. And one thing we did is, so we had questions that were job specific, and FAA would be a question that would be job specific. Do you have any experience dealing with them? Do hypotheticals, which are the ones I typed up here. Give us an example of a situation you were in. How did you show fairness to the employee? Or so it was a combination. And the last thing we always did on our interviews is at the very end, we gave the candidate an opportunity to offer anything that they thought had not been covered that would qualify them. So basically you'd say like, do you have anything now that you would like to offer to the interview board, that would add to your credentials, if you will?
Correct.
But I think they have to all be standard so that everybody is being treated fairly. But I think that would be a very good question. Obviously, FAA involved knowledge
Yeah.
is fundamental to this job.
Ma'am, do you see your questions changing with each person?
Yes.
I'm okay with it.
They're all
If
different.
we're gonna give
They're all
the 6
different.
old crotchety guys
Well, an example,
the piece, I think we can give the mayor the latitude at the end to
well, and
figure out how this person's gonna work.
I respect-
City council and all that.
totally
That's exactly
like what Scott's
you're
saying, I respect that for sure.
know,
Fair authority. So I want to, but that's not something that would apply to the other candidates. You follow me? That's the kind of specificity I
Your
have.
line of questioning, is that just the excuse he gave? Was it the weather, or was there some other
I
underlying?
want to understand why, yeah, because it's kind of a big flag to me.
so,
So the way you could do that real quick
Well,
is maybe have it where you ask as one of the questions, is there any particular reason why you might be leaving the job you have now or have ever left one in the past?
Right.
And then give that to all the candidates. That might be one way to do it.
True, but like, didn't you say we're going to interview them one-on-one?
yes.
Individual? So, I mean, we can ask the other candidates, but I mean, the others just look like they kind of rolled, I didn't have a reason to question a transition. It makes sense?
Well-
It wasn't something, his was just one that jumped out at me at that.
I think and this is just me, okay, I'm gonna throw this out. I think those on the board have 2 specific questions related to your area of responsibility. That covers the airport day-to-day. I like the idea that the mayor then would be able to ask a different question dependent on the candidate, because I'm the same way. I'm looking through this and having some questions about, wait a minute, you said you worked as an airport manager, but then you said you had never been in an airport before. So that's a little confusing to me. So I think we cover the basis for the airport, but then we get a different insight from the questions that she poses and answers, depending on the candidate.
Yeah.
I just,
And I'll be happy to share all the questions. I mean, because I'm sure you guys probably saw a lot of the same stuff. We all have the same information.
so, and I think that works only because, so the questions that come from the board will be the same for all the candidates.
right.
The mayor's questions, though, could vary dependent on
Candidates.
experience and specific answers that we're looking for from that standpoint?
We can do whatever we want. So you could also have that at the end when you offer to let them add anything they've got. That might be the time, if we formulate
We can go.
questions in the right pattern.
At a time, for sure.
Do the specifics at the end.
Questions, so.
Another thing you're going to find when you interview people, I had two particularly unusual interviews over the years. I had one guy that I knew was qualified. He worked in another department of the plant. He'd applied to come over. And when he got in there, he froze. He couldn't answer anything. And I'm like, you deal with my department on a daily basis. And he just froze. Then I had another one that showed up. The interview was at like 10 o'clock in the morning. He showed up 10 minutes late at the guard shack and wanted to know if he still had his interview. I said, I think you just had your interview. You didn't show up on time. But everybody's going to be different. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Rex.
No, that's not a problem. I don't have a problem with the mayor asking anybody anything, you know. That's her prerogative. Just as it's our prerogative to submit the questions for it. I know that when I got hired in Jacksonville, when we were talking about, you know, only having 2 or 3 people do the interview, when I was going to be hired in Jacksonville for the fire department, I walked in and there was a room of 20 people.
Yeah, an interview board.
Well, it was every big chief on the department, plus a couple of the small chiefs, plus a couple of captains and a couple of lieutenants. And you walk in and that kind of scares you, seeing all this brass and everything. And so one lieutenant asked me, he said, do you know how to operate heavy equipment? And I went almost like, did I come into the wrong room?
You thought the question was too
I thought I was going to be a fireman. I didn't know I was going. But that was just one of the questions that she wanted to know. You know, because I had 10 years experience of being a firefighter before I went to Jacksonville. I'd been a paramedic for 10 years. So they couldn't get me on anything like that, you know. So she asked about heavy equipment, and I just happened to have had, at the time, a D4 Cat bulldozer. And I said, well, by the way, I do, you know, I do happen.
Just kind of threw you off because it was such a simple question, too.
Yeah, but she kind of went, And so it was one of those gotcha questions that could come up just to see how you're going to react to it.
Right.
And I could see that coming from the mayor, not necessarily from us, but I can see that coming from the mayor, just to see how they're going to react to it.
All right, so if we do 2 questions per board member, what do you think, Mary, you're going to have at least 3 per?
Well, some of them
Candidate.
have really, I mean, I'll go through them again, but I'm sitting here looking, there's 3 with that guy, 3 with that one, 2 with this one, 1 with this one. So I've got like anywhere from 1 to 3.
Okay.
It's not like a huge number, but they're very, very specific.
Just do that at the end, probably before.
And I'll submit you my questions so you can see per candidate, like what I'm, and so maybe you guys look and say, oh yeah, I know why she's asking that question.
So back to our format, because we'd originally talked about Lynn was going to ask as the mediator all of the questions.
That's fine.
We can still incorporate yours.
Absolutely.
Hers, okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all.
And then that way, everybody has a note sheet of each question, and you can write down your
Right, your,
notes
what your
on
comments
each
are, your
question for
thoughts.
each
Yep.
candidate.
All right, so let me follow up that with, do we want to send these questions to the candidates prior to the interviews?
I don't
I don't
think
think
that
so.
would be.
I don't think so.
No, you never do that.
No, we've never done that.
It's changing.
Well,
I mean, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't
but-
think you let them, part of the reason, in my opinion, you have an interview is you want to see the reaction of the Rexes. Oh, they're asking about heavy equipment. A lot of it is reading, because let's face it, at least in my experience, in my department in the 19 years I was in management, I hired 8 people, but I sat on interview boards for different departments. So I've probably interviewed 300 people in that 19 years, not of my department. But you're going to have those people, and they can even be older, and they're still very nervous. You have to comfort them, calm them down, you know, and let them realize, hey, just asking these questions. But everybody that does an interview becomes a used car salesman.
You're exactly.
I'll only let you hear what's the best. So if you catch them with your interview questions and it's on the spot, and how do you know that this person doesn't know the next person? And they say, well, they can still tell them, but it's not really till you get in the context of the room or that situation, I think, that you get it. But I don't think it's a good idea to give them the,
Yeah.
it's not a quiz or a test, you know.
And it's all
No.
public anyway, so each candidate can sit in on everybody's interview.
Yeah.
They could.
Yeah, it's just the nature of how things are in a public agency.
You can ask them not to, and I think they would. Because I don't think that's fair if you're interviewing fifth, if you've heard
Right.
everybody's answers.
Yeah.
It is public. They can go watch it on YouTube in their car, but you can just ask them as a gentleman and an officer, whatever we used to say. You know, don't, on your own integrity.
Well, I'll tell you what, so.
Watch everybody else's interview before yours.
So with Abbott, I shared this with Mike, and this is crazy, but we would pluck from one role out of any of the jobs, sales roles within the US. We'd pluck after 200 applicants per position for a particular area, like we're up in Boston, for example. And out of that 200, we picked 3 people after they went through recruiter interviews, manager interviews online or on the phone direct, and then in-person interview, we brought 3 in. They would fly me in as I was the trainer at the time for the region, but I acted as as a customer in a particular role play, which the employee, the applicant knew nothing about. They think they're coming in for an interview with the director of the country and the region director. They see me and introduce me as trainer, but I'm going to be the customer for the day. They're handed a 25-page document. They're given an hour to review the document and come back and entertain a sales interview with a customer, role play. And the managers observe how they interact with the customer. Has hardly anything to do with their resume. And again, just like Rick said, like Scott just said, you want to see them in their true element. And they are prepared because they've done all this in their career, right? The confidence level. But when you throw a oddball at them, it kind of takes them off, just like you said, Rex. So you see a natural state, and you want to see that because you all work with the public and all those things, that interaction. And many times we sit here and we look at all this and we get to that point of that interview and we go, damn, I didn't know I was going to see that. You're just like, wow, that kind of surprises me a little bit. I'm kind of leaning now another way. So I think, yes, I don't think they definitely need to know the questions.
And I think we want to see how they respond on the fly.
Absolutely, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see how they,
It was always a telling experience, believe me.
yeah.
It was crazy, but
all
interesting.
right. So my next point here was finalized questions. How do we want to go about getting your questions submitted? I think we should send those directly to you, Lynn.
Yep.
And so if you'll come up with 2 questions for your area, I know I've got 5 or 6 in general, but narrow it down to 2. And then the mayor's going to have her 1 to 3, depending on the candidate. And let's get those to Lynn. Timeframe. How soon could y'all get that to Ms. Lynn?
I can hand it to him. Chicken scratch.
Okay, so our final questions to Lynn by Wednesday, September the 20th. And she'll have that list. All right, everybody good with that? Okay. All right, so then,
So we'll end up with 12 questions from us, and then is it 3 from the mayor, or you may have
1 to
1?
So we're going to have 5,
3.
let's say it's 2 per person. So it's going to be 10 questions max.
I think that's a good number. But then, 12 or 13 questions.
and I think that
At
works
an hour.
within the time allotment as well. Depending on how talkative the person is, as mediator, you may have to,
Or if there's any follow-up questions from the board regarding the others.
I would just suggest something like you give them 3 or 4 minutes at the beginning and the end, let them introduce themselves. And you're going to ask every question from all of us.
Correct.
Okay.
Same questions, yeah.
And a bump, give them like 4 minutes to answer each question, and then the mayor's 2 questions at the end. All that fits within 60 minutes, and it would probably
Yeah.
just be like a 10 minutes or something to tally.
10 to 15.
Go to the bathroom, 10 or 15
Sure.
at the end, and I think we can still keep all that between 60 and 70
Well,
minutes.
again, you're gonna find some people, we did this, and y'all probably did it over the years, your personalities, there was A, B, C, or D quadrant. I'm the type I have to tell every dadgum detail to people are dropping off into
Yeah,
a coma.
we're going to depend
And
on
other
Lynn to
people-
tell you,
Yeah.
right, Mr. Meyer, that's good.
Well,
Right,
that's why
no, that's
we're
what I'm
not.
saying.
But what I'm saying is some people will answer you in very, almost contrite, very deliberate, quick, and
Right.
efficient.
Yeah.
Other people are going to be the Scott Friars, and they're going to expand, and you're going to go, okay, that's enough, thank you, let's move on to the next question.
Right.
And I get that.
Yeah, I'm
So
following
some
that
of your
in.
interviews may be done in 35 minutes, and some others may take up the full hour.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next item here.
Okay.
You lobbed that one up there, Scott.
You just hit the mute button, right?
All right, so the next thing that I had was we need to finalize a matrix for the scoring. So I really appreciate what Mayor Rodenroth had put together for a resume review on her comparative chart spreadsheet. I gave you also 2 others, one that Mr. Van Zant had presented a couple of meetings ago, and then one that Mr. Dagenet had got to us today. So they're similar. Do we want to try to finalize a matrix for, I think what the mayor's put together for, well, it doesn't matter, really.
Same in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
I did take it from it might be Embry Riddle, and I've got the reference on it. And she identifies for a rural airport the absolute must of what they should possess. And the only thing I think I left out was languages or a few other little small things. But it was very specific on what the criteria should be to manage an airport. And that's kind of where I pulled my list. I even felt like there was other things that could have been added, but we want to keep it simple for us, right?
Yeah.
And I think the simpler it is, and I like the way this is, we're showing the previous experience with the airport, education levels. I gave scores based on formal degree versus not. Of course, they all had gone to high school, but either a college or an advanced degree. Many of them did have masters, which I thought that was quite impressive. But, it's more important, I think, the experience. And on the description that I gathered on the duties, 3 to 5 is the minimal experience level that they expect for someone to have that role. You know what I mean? From what I saw. And I think that's fair because there's so many hats to wear, Somebody straight out of school is just going to really struggle, I think. So that's, again, I gave them a 5 if they had that. If they didn't have it, they got a 3 or a 4 on my scoring. They had some, but they didn't have enough.
Right.
So,
Well, since we're not using a scoring matrix to pare down to a short list, then I think it gets us back to when the questions are asked, or do we need to even have a scoring matrix? Because we're interviewing the 5, we just need some sort of scoring matrix based on how they answer the questions.
Yeah, I use the mayor's tool
To look at the
to
resume.
figure out to look at the resumes and figure out who I wanted to interview and rank order them. I kind of like having a 1 to 10 at the end, but at this point, I think we might just want to put safety, intergovernmental, aviation experience, whatever our specialty areas are, and compare them 1 to 10 on how they answered 7 sets of questions. And so, or we could just put our last names. Okay, so he answered Dodge and Hollis questions, answered Ludwig's questions, 1 to 10. Because, the ones that have worked more are going to do better in areas, and some of them have Embry-Riddle advanced degrees, and they're going to, answer a different way than
True.
some Neanderthal like me that just ran airports all over.
Well, these look good to me if you're viewing the, like say you're looking at the resumes before the interview, what we did is we had a scoring system on each question. And what we would do is the interview board, everybody had the same scoring sheets, everybody had the questions on their sheets. And depending upon how they liked the answer, like if you had 20 questions, the most points you could get for that was 5 points. It was amazing how close different individuals sitting at that table, how close their scores came of ranking 1 through 5 on the answer. 1 being the poorest, of course.
And that's based on those standardized questions, like
And
y'all are
so
in
if
all
you do
specialties.
something like that way, because somebody may do good at 4 or 5 questions, but they may bomb on the other 6. And trying to go back in your head and then get it in here, you're having to do math. It's just easier when it's with the question.
Correct.
Score the question.
And
I
you're
kind of agree with Charlie here. I think either one of these tables do well for reviewing the resumes, the applications.
Right.
But we might want to modify one of the tables to be tailored to the actual question process, interview process. And kind of to score that out.
So maybe what we do is the matrix is based on the questions that you guys submit, right?
Right.
And then mine are just the one-off ones because it'd be to those individuals specifically, but y'all's would be more of a standardized, and then you all grade that individual
On the standardized
on
question.
the standardized questions, exactly.
Right.
And mine are just the ones that are kind of the, leftover ones that are for the individuals particular. And they would not be like a graded, they would just be we just have to see how they're going to respond when you ask the question. Follow me? So y'all's,
Makes sense.
yeah, y'all's, I could totally see y'all's questions like that because of your experience and then seeing their reaction. And then that really gives you a standardized view, and then you all can really know, like, yeah, he answered that question better than the other guy did.
Yeah, yeah.
And it gives you, and you do it at the moment that they're in that question. Yeah,
Well, the other
sounds good.
reality is,
yeah,
because
I agree.
the 6 of us are going to have 2 questions each, so that's
That's 12 questions,
outnumber you, basically,
which is fine.
per candidate, so.
What about doing a matrix of 1 to 5 or however, whatever that number is, that can be under each question on the interview, including within an overall ranking, which includes presentation, language skills, how they answered the question, things of that nature, and overall, because you're gonna need something, again, you're doing interviews for
gauge.
hours.
Yeah, you're going to
You need something to
have
gotta go
something to
through
look at
and
like that.
remember they were fidgety, or if came out, or, how they presented themselves in front of you, things like that.
I mean, I did a thing, scoring matrix for people doing presentations. So they had to put together the materials from whatever subject and do a Zoom call, presenting like they're in a public situation. So everything, all the connecting to us online, their visuals, the format, all the wording. So what I did is a 10-score matrix, 10 things on the bucket list that were required to do a proper PowerPoint presentation. And I had other judges on the call as well. And so they would get like I guess it would be a 1 would be 100%. If they didn't hit on something like they were saying ums and ahs too much, they got a 0. So we did it like that. So the highest score was a 10. Anything less than an 8, they didn't really pass the class. So it was real simple, like y'all's questions, for example, lined up, and they hit that to your, to what you feel is agreeable. Or you could just put it a 1 to 5. 5, they were really good, 1, they weren't so good. And at the end of the day, you see the total score. But you could also take all those those level, or those line items and say, well, these 5 guys, some of them got 1, some of them got a 5. It's going to jump out to you is what I'm trying to say.
And I'd like to suggest, just to kind of keep a matrix somewhat simple,
Yeah,
I think as someone mentioned, just put the heading of each of the positions on the board, that particular heading, have 2 boxes for it, 1 to 5, because we know what our questions are.
right.
And should be a fairly way to just, jot down what we felt was the response of each one.
I think keeping it really simple is probably the right thing to do. Because when y'all scuttle back together or cuddle up at the end, you'll be able to say, wasn't what I expected. It's kind of interesting the way it's kind of rolled out, you know, and then you've got it right there in front of you. Because like Lynn said, you're going to be in these hours and hours of interviews. You want to do it at that moment and get all your scoring done before you interview the next person.
Right.
In all fairness to that candidate.
Yeah.
So,
And that's basically the way we did it at the college. Everybody asked the same question, it's all standardized.
yep.
And
So if we do 1 to 5 as the numerical matrix portion, then 1 being,
less,
Be poor.
1 being
gonna
4
say-
and 5 being the better score.
okay, so what's going to be in between though? I mean, it's like the mayor did here.
1 through 5.
She had 1 equals none, 2 equals minimum, 3 was satisfactory.
That might be more than we need at this point.
Yeah, let's keep it simple. I
agree.
I believe in this, and it's an old Army adage, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And I know you've
talking about, yeah.
heard that a gazillion times.
Yeah, we did
But
the 1 and the 0. so-
Yeah.
And we added up all the
If you
ones.
try to start narrowing it down, then people have to, you know, it then becomes.
So what's your suggestion?
1 to 5, and you don't need any, I mean, that is your own perspective. If 1 is bad and 5 is great, whatever you come up with in between is your own personal thing without having it to be described.
Okay, so you are suggesting use 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yes.
But that's each individual's prerogative as to what number they feel is appropriate.
Like they kind of hit it, but they didn't really hit it. You know what I mean? So a 2 or a 3, they're warm. A 4, they're really almost good, but they're not great.
Right.
Right? That kind of, it's just a matter of, you know,
Yeah, and
interpretation.
if you try to, what I'm saying is, if you try to label each one, and then,
I don't think we need a specific label for each number.
but that's what I was answering, David.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Kirkland on, was
Yeah.
about the numbering value, what's it worth? Well, it's a number,
Right.
you know? If you think they did good, give them a 5. If they're kind of wishy-washy, you give them a 2 or a 3. If they're absolutely terrible, you give them a 1.
Right.
You know, so instead of having to write it
But the
out.
scale is just 1 through 5.
Yeah, and you just have the box up there for conservation, safety and security, education, airport operations, intergovernmental, and I don't know what we're going to call yours, Mr. Kirkland. Because, I mean, you can't put down there chairman, because you're responsible for everything. You know, you're on all of it, so.
How about just airport administration?
Yeah, and that would be fine, but whatever questions that David's going to have, they're under that heading. And I don't think we need to write out the questions and do it. It's, you know, he's got 2 questions,
2 score boxes.
2 score boxes. I get 2 questions, everybody gets 2 questions, and you put it in there.
So Lynn, what was your thoughts about the matrix, the 1 to 5?
My 2-second evaluation or 2-cent evaluation is this: in going through interviews for city managers, going through evaluations for engineers and things of that nature. If you don't have a set matrix, you open yourself up for something. I'll tell you, we had one member of council ranked everything a 3 because he thought that a 3 was good in his mind, brought down everything because everybody else ranked it a 5. And so that was, 3 was in his mind adequate, 5 exceeded, but everybody else thought that he was very adequate, and so that threw off the matrix of.
So his interpretation was poor, fair, good, better,
Well,
and best,
so if there is
instead of just a number score.
No. Minimum standards of meeting expectations is 3, exceeds expectations is 5 or something, so that everybody's on the same page.
Right.
And then it's an easy.
It kind of diluted out the result is what happened, like what you're saying.
Yes, it did.
You're
And
suggesting we should label.
Too much specificity.
I don't think that you need to go as far as,
You need to understand what its value means.
yes, but go through as 1 is definitely does not meet expectations, 3 meets expectations, and 5 exceeds expectations. So that way, everybody is on the same page of, you think that he's adequate, but maybe there's room to grow. So that's why you didn't give him a 5 versus you thought that
almost like-
he was adequate
Yeah.
and we can grow later or something to that effect.
Here's the way ours worked, and it is along the same thing, but ours was very simple, stupid. You had 20 questions, if you were doing it that way, and each one, the highest score you could get was 5. When you add them up, and nobody should ever get 100%, because nobody's perfect.
Right.
But they would have 100. If we did it, and we do 5 points as the maximum per question, you would get 60 points. Yours may not even have to be scored.
Right.
Yours can be generalized questions. So at the end of that, the first candidate may end up with a score of 47. The next candidate may have a 51. The next candidate may have a 29. You just add the score up.
Right.
But it allows you, at the end of that question, or while the question's going on, you listen to them, and a lot of it is. I look at body language when I'm interviewing. You know, is that person nervous? Are they fidgety? Are they engaged? Are they looking around the room? That's part of your score.
It's part of your score.
So it's not just the subject matter. We've all met people that are walking encyclopedias, but do you think they can practically do the job? And that's part of your scoring of the body language and their presentation. So along Lynn's line, I think we're on the same page. Everybody just needs to be aware that 1 is the absolute lowest score, and that would be really unacceptable if somebody got a 1 in that category. But does that mean they're a bad candidate? They may need room for improvement. The other thing that we ran into, I think I missed some really good catches because the people were so nervous. They did have the knowledge, but they just were terrible at interviewing. And unfortunately, the interview process vetted them out. It doesn't happen often, but it can. So that is where your moderator may need to, like we'd run up a question, let's say, for example, ask them what you do in a certain situation. And their mind focus is strictly at work. Well, sometimes the mediator would take it and say, okay, maybe you never ran into that situation at work. What about with your family or a friend's business? So sometimes you got to guide them a little bit to help them get engaged and not be so uptight, if that makes sense. But the scoring, I think, is simple that way. You just score each question. When it's done, you evaluate it, what you heard, what you saw, and you give it a score.
Okay,
And at
so,
the end, you total it all up.
so back to the score, we're talking a 1, 2, or 3. 1 does not meet expectations. 2 meets expectations. I'm just throwing from the conversation, and then 3 is exceeds.
I think 5 gives you a little bit more levity or
1 does not meet expectations, 3
3 meets.
meets expectations, and 5 exceeds that way it gives you some room to,
And then
Put it in a
2 and
4
4 are
too.
just kind of in between.
yeah, a little bit more or a little bit less.
Right.
And then that way you have
So the highest score they could get overall would be like 70.
1 to 5 on each question.
or you could do 60 and not count yours, or yours can be.
Well, I'm saying not counting mine, I'm just saying the standard questions, standardized questions, because mine are going to be specific to that particular individual. So y'all's questions would be the 12 that you're
We
gonna-
got
that you're going to
6
do.
people times
6 of y'all times,
And I would consider maybe doing an overall presentation.
or
Overall
12 questions times 5 is 60 points.
is a 60, yes, I
they
had
present
wrong
it.
math.
to
Right.
you.
And then the other thing we did on that part where they'd like to add something, you can write notes on your sheet. So if there's something that comes up, we can have a roundtable between candidates, and you can say, well, I've got a question about this. What did y'all think about the way he answered question number 4? I was a little confused. But at the end, where
clarification.
they have to add anything, we might add on a bonus of up to 5 points for their own additional stuff, kind of like they've made their own interview question, if you will, at the end. And then you decide whatever the cap is on that total scoring, that it might be 65, it might be 70, whatever you want it to be.
So can I ask a clarifying question? This is really 2 different things. The matrix to me is a tool. You have lots of tools in your toolbox, right? Mm-hmm. But when I get done interviewing 5 people, I'm going to know who I want to hire. And if that person doesn't accept the job, I'm going to know who my number 2, 3, 4, and 5 person is. So are we going to use that matrix just to come up and at the end, go to the whiteboard and say, all right, Mr. Ludwig, who was your number 1 pick, and see, have 5 names and who got the most ones, the twos, and then we know.
Their
Are we
scoring sheet
handling
will
all
tell
these
that.
score sheets to Lynn, and she's gonna have an adding machine here and just tell us.
No, you'll
This guy
still
had
ask
63
him.
points and this guy had 52.
He'll go through his list and he'll say, this is my top candidate. And then you'll give your top candidate and he'll give his and so on.
Okay.
And then you might have to average them.
So we're not taking 6
Overall
or 7
points.
score sheets and adding them up and deciding.
Well, like you say, it's our,
Got a
it's our tool
63.
in the process.
Yeah, I think that
Okay,
these would be
okay.
your individual tools, and then you come together and say, okay, this is my 1, 2, and 3. And then that would be tallied up based on, you have candidate A is your 1, candidate B is your 1, candidate C is your 1, but candidate A got 3, 2, and then 4 or something.
Here's another thing you need to
Now,
consider.
overall, do you want to have the last question being to offer them an opportunity to ask us a question?
I think that that's fair.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And I think that and I would believe that there would be additional scoring, again, for how they present themselves, what information they present themselves, question, and then overall.
Because their question might surprise you.
Exactly.
Might.
One surprised me big time.
Well, here's another thing you might want to consider too, is you're going to have questions after the interview's over too. Because candidate number 3 is not going to be asked. I mean, they're going to be asked the same questions, but candidate 5 is going to reveal something you never thought of. There's nothing wrong at that point with Lynn or whoever, it might be David. For instance, like you were talking about, they said they left because of the cold.
Yeah.
So I always told my people if they went to interview for another position, or young people I've talked to, if the company asks you, are you willing to work nights and weekends, you always say yes. But in reality, as we get older, some people are not willing to do that. So when we get through the interview process, you may have your number 1 candidate that we can all pretty much agree upon. But then suddenly you see something in there that kind of throws the question up. We're going to have to call. Somebody's going to have to call them and get clarification. Now, you didn't mention this, but this came up in another interview. Are you willing to come out on call outs? Obviously that should be part of the job description, I guess we gave. But you may always have a follow-up question. So I guess what I'm trying to say is even if the scoring comes out and it looks like there's a definite candidate, it may be that your number 2 is the person you end up with. But that's where we do follow-up. And we've run into that.
And that would be a conversation for the board to have
Right.
on a
Sure.
case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
So are we going to allow the candidate to ask 1 question, 2 questions? Are we going?
I would honestly make that a part of their, at the end, is there anything that you have for us, or is there anything else that you would like to
Yeah.
add?
And that's what we've always done at the college is, do you have any questions for us?
Do you have any,
Just leave it at that.
yeah, or is there anything else that you'd like to add now that we've gone through this interview process? There might be something else that they think of that they would like to make you aware of.
Okay, you'll put that in the form
I will.
of question with the same scoring matrix. So you'll take each one of our questions and list them and then have
Have the
a
scoring
1 through 5 underneath each one.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Does that need to be a motion?
No, we don't take action. We don't do
Oh, okay.
on workshops.
Not a problem.
Now, that particular question you were talking about, is that just to the board in general, or is that could it be to any specific person? How would it, because I'm just trying to,
Oh, as a candidate.
I know through the interview,
It's just
Yeah,
what
however-
they want to ask of us.
It may be the
where any of
applicant.
us could potentially answer it, or it's only
Right.
going to be directed towards one particular person, or
Typically, it's directed to the interviewing group,
Right.
and then,
Well, they might have a question like, well, how many people would be reporting to me? We don't have that. That's not a question. That's something we know. Or they might say, have you got any future expansion plans? Is this the building I'm going to be working in, or?
Yeah.
But it should be about the airport or the job.
Right.
right.
well, I've only been through this process on the interviewee side.
Right.
From my experience.
You're in the hot
for my
seat.
life, yeah. And that's how they did at the very end of that one. And then we're sitting around a big table with a lot of big official people. And the chief was sitting at the far end and said, Mr. Ludwig, we're going to turn the tables on you. We've asked you, for 30 minutes questions. Now we're going to ask you, do you have any questions for us?
Right.
And this was this was a department I worked for before, but he was just an old, kind of like you thought about the old grumpy, disgruntled guy or whatever and all that stuff. This man never smiled. And he looked down his glasses like this and he never looked up at me. He just kind of just kept looking down and he said that, Mr. Ludwig, do you have anything you would like to ask us? And I said, actually, yes, sir, I do. I said, when do I start? When I said that, he kind of glanced up through his glasses and he smirked. And I knew right then, I'm like, I got this job. I got this. Sure enough.
He saw you were engaged or whatever.
No,
He's like,
yeah, I think that's kind of a good thing like that. I just didn't know if it would go back to one particular person or if that's something that any of us may have to entertain.
right.
I mean, this guy that asked me, which was shocking, he says, we said, do you have any questions you'd like to ask us? And mind you, I'm with these big directors and all that. He looks right at me and he said, so what did you do at CDC? I was like, Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, 35, 40 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, I ran a laboratory there. And I was like, but you know what that did? Immediately told me he did his research. He researched every one of us on LinkedIn, social media. He looked at where we've all worked, what we've done in our jobs. And that, to me, says a lot about a candidate because they're preparing themselves for the individual that they're going to meet behind that table. And he actually got the job. He turned out to be an incredible rep. But it shocked the crap out of me because I'm sitting there going, I did not expect that because it's in a previous career, you know. But, you know, he was really seriously interested. And of course, it shocked our guys as well. But I thought it was a very strong presentation there, you know, just look at him as an individual. So you don't know what they're going to ask, which is a good
I
thing.
think that unless it's related to a specific field, that it would be addressed by the chairman. And just so that the.
Generally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it's related to airfield or if it's related to intergovernmental relations, which I would hope that they touch on or, you know, things of that nature. But if it's an overall operation.
Well, I don't think I'm going to make mine about the airfield. Mine are more about, again, the hypotheticals. I tell you, I've had people that come to me with an immense background or wealth of experience. But there's been times I've hired people, and it was a chance, you know, you're taking, but that you could tell they had a good attitude, they had a good work ethic just by their body language, the way they interviewed. And I'd almost rather, in this position, you can't do that, but in some of those working positions, I'd rather have somebody that does not have the knowledge of the job, that has a good work ethic, where I can mold them.
And that's exactly right. A job can be learned. You can discover from the FAA. You've got fantastic partners around the region that you can lean on.
Right.
But if you get somebody in here who doesn't fit, the personality-wise, that doesn't have the work ethic, that isn't willing to come out on a Saturday to mend a fence, then you're not going to be in a good position.
And I think the body language thing is huge. And we all know that. We've all lived long enough to know the difference that somebody, and I think somebody mentioned it, I don't remember who said it, something about the used carsman or car salesman, you know, and it's true. You know what I mean? Are they telling us what they know we want to hear? Or are they being genuine? And they might be a little fidgety, but you can tell they're genuine, you know, and they're telling you they're being honest and speaking from the heart, you know, and I think that makes a huge difference. And like I say, I know we've all lived long enough to see that, and we can read that and all, and that, I think that ranks very high as far as candidates go, because it's just, that can show the difference between.
That's why you have probationary periods, because once you find out the guy was a salesman or the gal was a salesman, you run them down the road, or you get them on the stick, you know.
All right, let me do a summary here, make sure we've got everything. So the number of candidates on the short list, we'll have five candidates. As far as the number of interview questions, there will be 2 from each board member, 1 to 3 from Mayor Roden Roth. No questions will go out to the candidates prior to the interview. We need to finalize our questions and get those to Lynn by 9/20/23, if you've not done that already. And then for the matrix for scoring, we're going to do a 1 through 5. 1 being, again, does not meet expectations, 3 will be meets expectations, and 5 exceeds expectations. And then the candidates will be allowed to ask questions and or make final comments at the end of the interview. Now, let me go back and raise a question about Mr. King. Does the board want me to try to contact him and find out exactly when he'll be back in state? If he will be back in state for the interviews? And thirdly, if not, do we want to entertain a Zoom type or Teams meeting interview.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
I think it would
Yeah.
be, I mean, looking at his application, I think he deserves the opportunity, whether it be in person or.
Determine if he will be
can't
local
here in
or
person.
not at the
We'll
time.
find out how savvy he is on Zoom. He says he's very savvy with all that.
The thing I like the most about him, he's not nearly the most experienced guy, not any more educated than the rest of them. He's kind of homegrown and might not have to do this again in 2 years.
Right. And so, yeah, a lot of that figures into it, you know, and I would hate.
None of that's written on any of his paperwork.
No, but that's why I'm saying, either way, we need to provide him the opportunity.
Sure.
To participate.
I agree. That's
All right.
however you, in your discretion.
I'll
figure
reach
that
out to him to find out what his schedule looks like, what his time frame looks like.
There are 6 hours in front of us in Germany, I believe. Yeah.
So,
Figure out that timing.
all right. Now, I've known him since he was a kid.
Well,
I
wait
feel like I almost know.
now,
I might purposely just call him.
That's why you have a scoring matrix. Because, no, but seriously, that's why you have a scoring matrix.
That's exactly
That's
why.
exactly why you have a scoring matrix, especially in a public entity.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I've been doing this for too long with too many different avenues and have had everything in the book thrown at us for this, so.
I've not seen him since he went in the Air Force, you know, he left the area and been overseas and, but anyway, all right, I will do that.
Mr. Kirkland, are you going to
Yes.
set the interview times for each candidate on the 26th?
If we're going to do an hour, and then how much time in between candidates do we want to shoot
I
for?
was wondering about that too.
I would look at it probably at least
15?
15 minutes so that you have time to collectively put your thoughts together and then restroom, drink, anything else in between.
Right.
So,
That should be reasonable.
yeah, I think so. And then
That's 6 hours.
if you want to,
15-minute breaks and 5 people.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you want to eat, put in a half an hour in between one of the interviews to just stretch your legs and grab something for us to lunch on real quick.
Okay. Does the board have a particular order that you would prefer of
I think you've got to
candidates?
accommodate the Zoom guy whenever you can.
Well,
Then I would look at
if it is, find out.
alphabetical.
Yeah.
No, I mean, since we're going to do 5.
Alphabetical.
Alphabetical, okay,
Okay.
that's what we'll do.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Yeah,
All right.
alphabetical. That way, it's just, this is your time that you're scheduled in, and there's no,
And
Yeah.
you might want to tell them to try to be to the interview 30 minutes ahead of time. And that way, if we are running ahead,
well, that's a
maybe.
good, I mean, I look at that with applicants who come
well,
into
again-
the city, that if, you know, are they here 10 minutes ahead of time in
Or they
case, and are
fly
they
in on two
flexible,
wheels.
are they flexible if, you know, I'm running 5 minutes late because of something that I know was not foreseen, how does that work?
Okay, I'll generate an interview schedule with the times and the breaks and, all right, are we going to want to break for lunch? We go 10:30, 11:30 on the first one. Are you saying 15 minutes or 30 minutes between
I would do
candidates?
15 minutes
15.
between candidates, but allow for a 30-minute break in between one of them so that we can put something in our mouth.
and you might do something like
10:30,
Rex said, just order
11:30.
pizza, something where everybody can grab a slice of pizza or something. Yeah,
It's just,
well, most of the time they will.
So 10:30 to 5:30 is what, 6 hours?
So if you got,
If you got 5 individuals and you got 15 minutes between. So it's an hour and 15 minutes for breaks, 15 minutes each, right? Is that right?
10:30 to 11:30.
So you got 5 plus 5, 1 hours, then an hour and 15 minutes for breaks. Is that correct? 6 hours, 15 minutes. So start at 10:30,
yeah,
5:30, 6:30 is to get done? That sound right?
I'll run this, so if I go 10:30, 11:30 for the first interview, y'all want to just do, because there's not enough time, if we're going to try to do something, a short break for lunch,
Make your lunch at 12.
If I make it a working lunch,
unless you make it a working lunch.
make it a working
I
lunch.
mean, I've done that a lot of times, I don't know.
I'd be okay with the
for
working lunch,
interview.
but I wouldn't be.
Yeah, you don't want to be eating in front
With
of
with
them.
the interview.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that.
I mean,
Okay.
I don't care what
We talk about council
Probably
members
I'll
who
bring
do
a
that all the
$20
time.
bill and send somebody to go get stuff.
So you just do a 30-minute break for lunch?
So why don't we do 10:30, 11:30, and let's figure on just in the next 30 minutes for us to discuss that candidate, take a 30-minute lunch break, and start again at 12:30, and go from there.
And, you know, getting one of them out of the way might make us all kind of come together and go, let's do something a little different. You know, or little things might just pop up and you're going, I didn't think about that. You know what I mean? So it's probably not a bad idea to do it that way.
Okay, I'll generate this. Lynn, I'll send that to you, let you review it first and see if you want to tweak it. And then once we get the final, then we'll email it to everybody.
And that way I can put their times on their questions.
All right. Anything else?
Oh,
Everybody good?
definitely. Of course, this would come after the fact. But I've seen the ball dropped on this many times, but whenever we do pick the successful, we need to make sure and follow up with each individual to let them know they did not get the job. That really leaves a bad taste in people's mouth, and if something goes wrong with the first one and you don't call these people back and they're just left hanging, I guess we'll work that out somehow, but we've got to notify. Either, do you do it with a letter from the city, or how do you do it?
Generally phone calls.
Okay.
Just let them know that, you know, we have chosen an applicant. but
We appreciate your
Yeah, we appreciate you
participation.
participating. If something changes in the next couple of days, you'll for sure hear from us.
Right.
Is at that point, you're offering somebody a job and then, or we haven't really covered this. Are we negotiating then between $45,000 and $55,000? Are you doing that?
I think that's, you know, once that candidate is selected, then yeah, that phone call's made, and on the application, some of them listed, you know, as far as salary, and some didn't matter.
But no, I'm just saying, are you negotiating with that person after he meets all of us? I want to go.
Well, I think they
It's a
put it
two-way
out
street,
on
especially
the
with an
salary
older guy.
range when
Yeah,
you
it
put
was
it out
in
on
the job description.
I've
so
turned plenty down.
There was some wiggle room in that
Yeah.
too, but
Is this a contractual position? We've talked about this a couple
Yeah.
of times.
This
So
is
with
just
it,
straight up salary, right?
it's a contracted position
so
with
with
a,
it being a contractual position, then that would be something that the board would have to vote on, enter into contract negotiations, and that's typically done through your attorney. And then they bring it, and then the board decides, okay, we are set on this salary, and this is start date.
Yeah, you
That
have
was-
45 to 55 on your
that's what's on the
advertisement.
job description.
The advertisement.
But our budget jump, we actually had 65 on the budget.
Oh,
So we did that to have us a little negotiating.
To get a buffer.
Yeah.
So back to Lynn's comments, we make a choice on a candidate. That candidate gets notified. But you're saying that the attorney should be going over the contract
Contractual negotiations.
and the salary negotiation?
Well, you and the attorney, the chairman and the attorney, I mean, we haven't had the attorney involved in squat. It just needs to be legal at the end, and you've
Yeah.
hired and fired enough people, it's gonna.
Yeah.
But that's, an attorney's always a good sidekick when you're in a government.
Right.
But the board also has to agree with the salary.
Exactly, there's,
Right.
the
We
breach of
had
the
a
salary and
So yes,
terms needs to be.
that would be the next meeting after
Right.
he's.
That would be the meeting, next following meeting, right?
Yeah,
Right.
come back, hey, Mr.
And they might even want to have a
whoever's agreed
special
to do
meeting,
this.
because like I say,
yeah, you're going to have a special meeting probably.
Yeah.
clock is ticking.
Then, are you looking at having a decision on the 26th? Do you need to have a special, or a special airport meeting at
I think that could-
6:30 on the 26th, after you go through interviews to discuss ranking and who you would like to enter into negotiations with?
We could do that the following week, though. We meet on the 3rd.
Right.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
either way,
And then, well, then send those rankings to the board on the 3rd, and then and decide then on who you would like to enter into negotiations with.
Because the applicants are probably going to ask you what the start date would be. or when you'll have your decision. I mean, you got to be prepared to answer that, I guess.
Right.
But you may not know that till after your meeting on the 3rd, right? From what y'all are saying.
You'll have, but they'll know who they're going into contract negotiations with them
Okay, but they wouldn't reach out to that applicant until after they do that?
until the 3rd,
Till the 3rd,
or until
so,
the 4th, probably.
right, so
Third.
candidate may say, when will you have a decision? So you may say, what, the 4th? I'm just saying, be prepared for that.
That might be then have a special meeting in October.
Well, I was thinking just not trying to expedite, but not trying to prolong things either. The idea that you suggested about after, it's going to be a long day, but after the interview, if we want to have a short special called meeting, then to just finalize who that candidate is.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the salary.
We're all going to be there.
Yeah, we're all going to be here, so I'll just do that.
And that way we
Will
can.
candidate be part of the meeting? Because it is a
No.
meeting.
No, it's a workshop.
No.
Oh, it's considered a workshop for the interviews?
Yep.
And then you have to have a meeting after to make a decision.
Correct,
To vote on
Okay.
something.
correct.
Yeah.
So we want to do that?
Yeah,
I think that's a
that-
great idea.
I think that would be the
Yeah.
best thing to do.
Dinner too.
Gosh, you're going to bust the airport budget.
Well, it looks like the interviews are
The interviews
going to last until 6.
is about
Okay.
6:15.
Yeah, it's going to be a long
Yeah.
day.
Well, I just said it's gonna be a
10:30 to
long day.
6:15, and then, so hopefully by
ladies.
7 o'clock, though, you know, rankings will be done, and you'll know who to go into contracts with. And so it's
Again, the
feasible
other
that you
thing-
could make a motion on the October 2nd to who your next airport manager is going to be, depending on how contract negotiations go. Mike doesn't seem thrilled about that at all. I saw that.
All right, so we will have a special called meeting then on the 26th.
Oh, it's the same day we're here.
Yep. And we'll put a time frame on there of 7 PM.
At 7?
Yes.
Yes. And that'll give time to go through and organize our rankings.
So we will get that information out. Mike will get that posted. And we'll come up with the agenda. The agenda will be pretty simple. We're going to review all of our scoring sheets and determine candidate. We'll rank them anyway in the event that the first one we choose doesn't agree. Okay? All right.
Sounds doable.
Anything else? All right,
I'll get us
we
there.
will,
One little, I have one little thing.
okay,
Amazing.
Would
I know I got to
you
go.
want us in a business casual like what we're basically in now, or do you want us?
At least ought to wear a sport coat, if not a tie. We don't. I had my toe operated on, it's the only reason I'm wearing flip-flops. I was out on this meeting today.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Not
That way
coming like this.
Believe it or not, if
No,
I ask that question,
Yeah.
then everybody knows and everybody shows the same.
Yeah.
Professional.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not wearing a sport coat or a blazer in this heat. I'll have a nice dress shirt on and some
But we'll
nice
be
dress
inside.
slacks, so that's what I've got. I don't even
We'll
know
turn
if
the
I
air
can
down.
fit my jacket anymore.
The sports coat, that's all I'm.
They need to dress to impress. We don't need to dress to impress, but it needs to be professional, probably right. You won't see me in here in shorts.
Well,
If I walk
It
in
is a good
here and
question.
the council was in shorts and flip-flops, I'd be like, I'm not coming to this Huckleberry town. Working for these people. Oh, my gosh. That's what I would say.
I'm sorry I had to ask it, but
No, it's,
Oh, it's a good question.
No, that was, it's a good thing to at least kind of solidify.
Yep.
you know, something, me, I would have showed up in tennis shoes, flip-flops.
so
Hey, now,
the answer is business dress,
They go with everything. I mean, you're.
business dress, all right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, with that, it's 4:15, we'll consider ourselves adjourned. Thank you so very much.
We did good.